All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Tuesday, September 24th, 2019. We are currently watching three active systems across the Atlantic Ocean this evening, with one additional area of interest in the Gulf of Mexico. So, looking at it tonight, we do have Tropical Storm Jerry, kind of a ghost of itself, and honestly, not probably really a tropical storm anymore, but we'll talk about him in a minute. He's generally drifting off to the east northeast. We do have Tropical Storm Karen, our most important player down the road, but dumping heavy rain tonight over parts of Puerto Rico and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. But overall, a fairly weaker tropical storm tonight. She's generally moving off to the north. We also have Tropical Storm Lorenzo, the big fella out here near the west coast of Africa, and is generally moving off to the west, and then will be moving more to the northwest later this week. The system I thought would be a hurricane by now, but it's had a little bit of a stumble today, but not much else is going to impede this over the next few days. It should become an impressive storm. We also finally have an area of interest here over the Yucatan Peninsula. It's moving slowly to the west. This may move into northern Mexico as a rainmaker, but right now we're not anticipating any significant impacts and unlikely to have any direct impacts to the eastern United States, especially the South Texas coast. So, looking at tonight, we're going to go ahead and run through them. We're going to go Jerry, Lorenzo, and then come back to Karen. So, we'll start with Tropical Storm, quote unquote, Jerry tonight. Kind of a ghost of its former self. So, you see the swirl right here at the center, but there's no thunderstorm activity. And when I say none, I don't mean like limited. I mean there's literally actually no thunderstorm activity at all with Jerry anywhere. So Jerry, by most accounts, should just be considered a remnant low or just like a strong low pressure that's not tropical at all. It's not even subtropical because even a subtropical storm would have some convection. It would just be kind of displaced. This has almost nothing. There's no frontal system. It's just like a swirl basically. So it's probably still producing some pretty gusty winds on the surface. So it will be moving towards Bermuda, which is actually right here, kind of hard to see, but it'll generally drift like this towards Bermuda. But overall, it's not. It's kind of defunct. The wind shear has ripped this thing to pieces. You can see the wind shear kind of rotating like this. It just robbed the system of all its convection. So Jerry looks pretty pitiful tonight, all things considered. And again, that track just generally drifting for the next day or two, but they may have to dissipate this thing well ahead of schedule since it's not tropical anymore. Looking this evening at a much more tropical storm, we have Tropical Storm Lorenzo. The storm I thought was actually going to be a hurricane by 5 p.m. this afternoon, but Lorenzo stumbled a little bit today. I believe there's just a little bit of northerly wind shear kind of pushing down on the storm. If you focus your attention to the bands right here, see how they kind of move off like this and they just kind of flatten out and don't really gain any latitude. It looks like there's just a little bit of north to maybe northwest wind shear just kind of bothering Lorenzo. So we saw that today the center was unable to really get going, but you see the last couple hours the thunderstorm activity has exploded right there in the center with those darker whites and pinks popping up out of those warmer colors, indicating that the cloud tops are getting really cold and the thunderstorms are starting to really build up, and you see that ring shoot around. And if Lorenzo can maintain that, it will be a hurricane by 11 p.m. tonight, or at the least by 5 a.m. tomorrow. But over the next few days, very little will bother Lorenzo. We do expect the storm to become a hurricane by tomorrow and a major hurricane by Friday. But generally speaking, Lorenzo is going to be guided by an area of high pressure to its north, and this should move it generally to the west, then northwest, and then north, and then eventually northeast as it curves back out to sea. And right now, the confidence is pretty high that Lorenzo won't be a problem for the eastern United States, but it will cause some havoc late this week and next weekend, or this weekend or early next week, as it does move up towards the British Isles and all that. Could really kind of kick the pattern around a little bit with them and give them some pretty gusty wind and weather as it moves up that way. So looking finally tonight, we have Tropical Storm Karen moving through Puerto Rico. This hour looks like mostly to the east side of Puerto Rico, as we do see Karen really trying to make an attempt at strengthening earlier today. The storm had a very limited convection yesterday. It was mostly on the south side of the storm, but today it was much more robust and widespread. Although this evening it begins to wane a little bit after sunset, which is kind of expected with these weaker storms. They kind of wax and wane like this, but some pretty impressive thunderstorm activity earlier today. We can look at the San Juan Puerto Rico radar. This is courtesy of Mark Nissimam over at Florida State. We can see here that from 2 o'clock this afternoon and on, she's kind of been sliding generally in this sort of motion. There's not really one organized center. One center tried to pop up here, and then a second one tried to pop up here. But generally speaking, the storm is kind of sloppy, and that is to be expected. But it is producing heavy rain and at least tropical storm force winds and squalls over Puerto Rico and some of the Virgin Islands as it does move through. Karen right now is kind of being dug along by this upper level, by this trough right here. There's not really an upper level low that's kind of digging the storm and kind of pulling it northward right now. The problem Karen is going to have for the next few days is this high pressure cell right here to off to its east, and then a high pressure cell over the eastern United States are going to essentially bridge over the next few days. Not exactly in that orientation, but I can show you better on actually the Earth map here. So this is your current mid to upper level pattern. This is 500 millibars, so we're about midway through the atmosphere. This is where we typically like to see the steering flow for most of these storms is mostly in this level. And then, so we see here we have the high pressure on this side of her and the high pressure on this side of her. You can see the noses of these high pressures are still a little ways away. This is kind of where Jerry is right now, moving away in this trough that Jerry kind of got caught up in. But if I go ahead and advance this 24 hours, we're going to go ahead and see that the high pressure on her east side has nosed in and the high pressure on the west side is nosed in. You can see how now there's very little room for Karen to escape. So Karen is moving up like this, and she's trying to move north. She's right here on this image. She's trying to follow that break, but it looks like the door will in fact slam shut. So we go into really into Thursday now, and we see these high pressures have completely bridged, and now it's just kind of this one big sort of high. Didn't draw it very well, but you get the idea that basically that door closed off, and now Karen is going to be stuck out here with this upper level low off to her east, or to her west rather, but she won't have many options. She won't have anywhere to go. She'll kind of just be trapped in this almost negligible steering flow. And as we see the forecast in the National Hurricane Center, we basically see this wandering motion. Now, they forecast her to generally move and generally off to the just east of north, and then this looping motion right about here over the weekend. And by Sunday, she'll pretty much be in the same area she was on Thursday afternoon, which is generally about this 25-degree parallel or area of latitude where she just kind of hangs out over the next few days. So where Karen goes from there is going to be very difficult. We're talking about a storm that's going to pretty much be in light steering flow. It could be weaker, it could be stronger. The intensity might matter as far as how fast she maybe wants to loop and get back over to the west. The taller storm will feel more steering flow, so she might. If she's a stronger tropical storm, she may be into a little bit of an issue, but she generally will have a fairly favorable environment for at least maintaining her intensity. The island is kind of wreaking havoc on her right now, but she should still maintain this kind of pulsy, wax wane sort of motion and or intensity, and she should be somewhat of a 40 to 60 mile an hour tropical storm over the next few days, and possibly even a little bit stronger. The Hurricane Center has her at about a 70 mile an hour tropical storm by the weekend, where she's kind of wandering in this area. But overall, she should have a fairly favorable environment. Maybe there's some indication on towards the end of the forecast that some drier air may be working in from her north and northwest side. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But you can see here our spaghetti models, as we like to call them, are just kind of all over the place, and this is to be expected. You're talking about a system that by day 5 is pretty much only right about here, and then you have to try to forecast 2, 3, 4 days from here. If I try to forecast 2, 3, 4 days from 5 days, which is 9 days, I have to zoom my weather map all the way out to things that are over here, which are in Asia, to try to time when they're going to be over here as far as how fast upper level patterns move and shift. So trying to make that out at this point is pretty much a moot point. So no one knows where Karen's going yet. I don't know, and no one else that thinks they know knows. So the big thing, important thing to understand tonight is Karen needs to be watched very carefully this weekend or early next week. We will know much more of the next few days as she does begin to wander, but until she begins to really move away, there's not going to be a lot of indication where she's going to go. We can try to look at some upper level maps and kind of think maybe where she might want to go. We know next week that, so we'll go into Monday of next week. This is an upper air map by the European model. We see a very strong ridge of high pressure just camping over the eastern United States, and we have a trough out to the west of that, and we have a trough over the eastern or the central Atlantic, and Karen is trapped between them. She'll be somewhere in this area. You can't really see her on the map, but she'd probably be somewhere near this blue dot by then. But essentially, this high pressure doesn't go anywhere going into Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. The high just continues to sit over the eastern United States, so it will bring a very warm end to the month of September and beginning of October. But as long as this high pressure is here, this is not going to allow any cold fronts that would look something like this to try to come down and get Karen. So she probably could be wandering for some serious time, generally trying to going up under this high. So I think somewhere in Florida could still be in play. The Gulf could still be in play, but we are talking about a long range forecast, and many things can and will change change in that time frame. So tonight, I think the only thing we really need to know is that Karen could be an issue next week and it needs to be monitored, but you should already have a plan in place and you shouldn't be worried about it too much. Just know this is going to be a storm we're going to talk about for a while because Karen could be wandering not only to the end of this week, but probably through most of next week as the storm likely does not find any serious steering flow to get it moving anytime soon. So something to watch in the long term, nothing imminently threatening over the next few days. So finally, guys, I'm going to leave you this. NOAA has their new global hazards outlook, which does include tropical cyclone development, and this is valid through October 8th. So this is the first week, and this is the second week of October. And we see that NOAA still believes that the tropical Atlantic, the main development region, will still be open for business well into October, where we're going to see more storms form. So keep an eye out into October, guys. Don't sleep on the month of October. I'm telling you, every October we get some crazy storm, and everyone's like, "Oh, I thought the season was pretty much over in September." It's not. So we're going to be watching both the main development region of the Atlantic as well as probably the Gulf of Mexico going into mid to late October for some development there. We're going to still have a favorable phase of the NJO index passing over us, which means that tropical storm and tropical cyclone development will still be somewhat encouraged by the upper atmosphere, which means we need to keep our guard up through the rest of the hurricane season, at least through the end of October. So that's what I got for you this evening, guys. Plenty more to come, plenty more to watch. We're going to have a lot of time to chew on Karen, and the rest of the storm shouldn't be a problem. So, hey, guys, that's what I got for you this evening. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.